We are going to return to Miami in Florida. This is the presidential motorcade of Donald Trump and his family, friends, supporters. They're all in that motorcade as they left the courthouse in Miami in Florida a short time ago. Just to recap, it was about a 45-minute hearing this morning. Donald Trump pleading not guilty to 37 criminal counts, 31 of which relate to top secret classified documents. The others include obstructing justice, conspiracy, concealment, and false statements. There was an electronic fingerprint. There was no mugshot. Our Annelise Nielsen, our Washington correspondent, was in the courthouse. Annelise, good afternoon where you are. Talk us through it. What happened?
Look, I was in the courtroom for this hearing and it did go for quite some time. The biggest discussion was around whether Donald Trump could continue to have contact with any of the potential witnesses in this trial and even his co-accused. This is one of the complicating factors, as many of the people who will be called are quite close to the former president. But he attended court here to be formally arraigned, and it was here that the case title was read out, The United States of America versus Donald Trump. And Donald Trump pleaded emphatically not guilty through his lawyer. What we also saw was his co-conspirator alleged by the special counsel, Walt Nata, at the bench with him. Now, this is where we've seen this drag out a bit. For anyone to be arraigned in the local jurisdiction of southern Florida, you have to have someone who's admitted to the bar here. Donald Trump did have someone admitted to the bar, so he could be formally arraigned, which means he could plead guilty. Walt Nata couldn't. So now there's another 2-week delay until he can get local counsel and then proceed to that. But what we've seen here is the beginning of what's going to be an incredibly contentious case. Thousands have crowded around the court building here in downtown Miami to support Donald Trump. This is an area with a huge amount of support for Donald Trump. The other thing we saw in the courtroom was he emphatically wants a jury trial. That is the norm for criminal trials in the federal jurisdiction, at least in the United States. And so that will proceed. This is going to be a huge hurdle. How do they find an impartial jury to deliberate this case? All Donald Trump's team needs to do at that point then is to turn one of them for then the case to be dismissed. So this is going to be a huge legal showdown, and you can see why, with so many of the supporters coming down here to support the former president.
So how does that fit in with an election campaign now underway, Annelise?
Look, that's the big question. We still don't have a clear idea of when this trial will happen. There is a push from the government side, at least, to have this be a speedy trial, to be resolved quickly. Normally, that would be around 2 months. Right now, one of the other discussions they had was that there wasn't even a set witness list that they could provide to Donald Trump's legal team. So we're still a long way off that trial being able to take place. The kind of issues we're looking at, too, is does this trial happen during an election campaign? If Donald Trump wins, are we potentially looking at a trial when he's the president-elect? He doesn't have the powers of the executive, but he's still the incoming. There's another issue with the presidential transition if that were to happen, but those are still a very long way off, because what we're talking about is allegations. He has the right to mount a defence. He's very confidently going to mount that defence. And there are 37 counts. While they do potentially carry jail time, they don't necessarily. That depends on severity. It depends on what the jury finds. And so while this is the beginning of one of the most unusual criminal cases in living memory in the United States, there's still many questions that haven't been answered by today's brief hearing.
So, I mean, realistically, it could happen after the next US election, Annelise.
Well, look, the complicating factor there is once anyone is in the office of the President of the United States, you do have the right to pardon people. And so this kind of notional sense or theoretical sense of a pocket pardon is the kind of euphemism that is used for it, is the President could technically pardon themselves, but you have to be convicted first. And so we're also talking about the theoretical possibility of a prosecutor trying to mount a case against a sitting president. More likely, the incoming president would say to anyone who wants to be the Attorney General, well, guess what you're going to have to do if you want this job? This case needs to go away.